All right. Welcome everyone to this very, very cool and creative new thing that Brescia University College and Evolve Sport and Nutrition, the Learning Center, have put together. My name is Ben. I'm the president of Evolve Sport and Nutrition and the host and creator of a TV show, Highway to Health, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And this is a very, very cool kind of thing that Brescia is doing because they, as well as I, have recognized for the past few years the dietitian nutrition world and job market has shifted rapidly, and there's not a lot of resources out there right now for a lot of nutrition professionals as well as dietitians and dietetic interns right now entering the job force on how to create a niche in what looks like a very, very, very overcrowded market in regards to not only having very, very well established and famous dietitians, but also, of course, competing nutrition experts, so to speak, and there was an air quote around that, it's very, very difficult. So, in my opinion, right now, I'm just going to share a little thought with you all. In my opinion, right now, it's not about talking trash about others to make yourself look better. It's about making yourself look better by making yourself look better, and your qualifications. So this is how we do that, and we talk about how to create a niche in an overcrowded market by giving yourself more of a voice, a different kind of voice in something that already exists. So what we're going to do right now is something a little bit unique and a little bit different. This is how I start off all my presentations, and it does link up with the whole thematic purpose of this presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself because, of course, I borrowed this from Dennis Coulier, who's another unicorn male dietitian, that audiences receive information better if they know something about the presenter. So here we go. So this is me with my graduating class of dietetic interns at Sunnybrook Hospital, the Sunnybrook program back in, I believe, 2010. So I've been a dietitian for about 8 years, and I did my training at Ryerson University, and then went to the Sunnybrook internship program, did their program, and then graduated, became a dietitian, and worked in long-term care. In long-term care, where I started off my career about 4 years, it was quickly realized that that wasn't the location and the workplace setting for me. I was just I wanted to do something different, and long-term care wasn't the environment for me. That it just didn't work out for me. It's not that long-term care. I'm not saying anything negative against long-term care. It's just it wasn't for me. My ambition was a little bit different than what I was able to do there. So it was decided that I would leave long-term care and I would start Evolve Sport and Nutrition and do that a little bit differently. So before I did that, I trained with the sports dietitians of Australia, as well as got a personal training certificate, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'm an avid traveler, and and my career in nutrition, believe it or not, started off as a pastry chef and a chef, where what I love to do is travel the world to learn how to cook, because the culture of food and the food and cultures in general and travel are the things that excite me quite a bit. And these are pictures from my most recent international travel experience, which was quite some time ago, and I believe it was Guatemala and Belize. So what we did here is these are night markets from Guatemala, and this is a Belizean night market. These are food markets from Guatemala, and these are night markets from Belize. In fact, the funniest thing about this picture here was that it was just a funny day where we were on the bus for about 10 hours because there was a car fire on the middle of the highway, so everyone had to stop. Police and firefighters had to put that car out, and then we got into a restaurant. We just finished a lovely 4 to 5 course meal, and then what happens while we're eating and then we're sitting on the patio, this dessert market opens up right next door to it, and everyone's looking and they're thinking like there's no possible way I can like that anyone can eat anymore because we were just so full from that lovely dinner. But of course I go to the night market right across the street and start pounding back a couple more desserts, because that's of course what I love is desserts and pastries, and just cooking in general. So a lot of fun. I'm also an athlete, and I was a personal trainer. I am a competitive Ironman athlete as well as marathoner. Now, this picture here, these are from the Chicago Marathon, which is probably one of my favorite marathon experiences I've ever had so far. That's 42.2 kilometers, and Chicago kept the energy up the entire time, and that was so much fun to do. My most recent marathon was in Montreal this year, where I PB'd, and that was fantastic. And then these are pictures of me in my this is a picture of my first half Ironman, which is for anyone out there that's questioning how crazy I am. This is roughly a 3K swim, a 90K bike ride, and a 21.1K half marathon at the end of all of that. So that took me about 8 hours to finish, and that was just absolutely brutal. Despite the fact that I'm smiling in this picture, I just slowly collapsed afterwards just because my body was just like, what did you just do? Why did you decide 8 hours of continuous movement was the thing? But of course, I'm a crazy person, and I love it. And of course, this is a picture of my first Olympic Ironman, Olympic level triathlon. That was a little bit more manageable at around 1.5K swim, 40K bike ride, and a 10K run. And that was Guelph Lake 1, and of course I PB'd again this year, and it was quite significant. So, and then I am also a producer as well, a TV producer now, as well as a TV show creator and host of my very own TV show premiering on the Bell Fibe Network on January 2019. In fact, we're going to have some very, very exciting news coming up very, very soon. We shared the teaser trailer last week, and within 48 hours, we had over like 1,200 or 1,500 views from all sources put together, and that was very, very exciting because I just didn't know how the public would receive this, and we'll talk more about this later on. But to give you a little rundown of what the show currently is, it's a travel show that explores health and the communities in health and how people promote health, and we're doing this very, very differently. It's a different show altogether, and it premieres on the Bell Fibe Network in January. So life has been very, very exciting. And of course, this is the first promotional video that we actually produced out there. And of course, this was the early pre-production stage kind of material that we shared with the world. And we'll talk more about Highway to Health in a little bit, but very exciting stuff, very nerve-wracking time. And life is just interesting right now. I always love to end my intro bit with a picture of my dog. His name is Chewbacca, and he's, for anyone out there that's a dog person that knows anything about chocolate labs or labs in general, they're just delightful little morons, in the sense where his brain is developed, he knows what to do, but he'll do stupid things. So this is a picture. My favorite story of him was when he was a pup around 1 year old, which, for a lot of labs, that's when they start to develop a brain, and they don't stop until 2.5 to 3 years, where they fully develop their brain and figure out what to do. My favorite story or memory of him was when he when he was chasing his tail, and then he caught his tail one day, started chewing on it, not realizing it was hurting him, and he was crying from the pain, but he was so proud of the fact that he caught his tail that he just kept chewing on it all afternoon until he fell asleep with his tail in his mouth, and now there's a white bald spot on his tail from where he chewed on it as a pup, and it was just one of the funniest things in the world. And I like to dog shame him a lot on Instagram on my personal account, so I like to hold up photos. I like to take pictures of him about him doing stupid things, like him waking me up in the morning by sneezing my face and smiling his face off about it, which is adorable, but at the same time not the most ideal way I'd like to be woken up in the morning. But it's just one of the really, really fun things. Anyways, that's enough about me. Let's get into what we're planning to talk about today. So, of course, we're talking about how to create your niche in an overcrowded market. So what we're going to establish right now is talking about the importance of a niche. Four questions that I find essential to ask yourself to find your niche. 5 steps to creating your niche. How I'm going to go through a little bit of a history of how I created my niche in regards to both the world of sports nutrition for ESN as well as Highway to Health, the TV show, and why it worked, and of course talking about how to keep your niche relevant, because this is one of the most important things I always find in that world. But more than anything, we're going to jump into the presentation right now. More than anything, though, this webinar, this presentation is about one thing more than anything else, and that is how to get a better relationship with failure. failure is something that not a lot of people are good at, and they don't have a good relationship with. In fact, if you look at my work history and as well as my life history, it's filled with failure. And I mean that in the most positive way, in the sense where failure has my relationship with failure is that I actually like failure, in the sense where I learn so much more from failure and I get excited by it because I'm onto something big. I'm learning something. If I succeed, which a lot of people love that feeling for success, when they succeed, it's like there's nothing that I can learn from that. It it just tells me I did everything right. Versus failure teaches me, okay, you got to try something different. You got to look at this differently. You got to try just anything different. And it's, to me, an abbreviation. The word fail is an abbreviation. It stands for first attempt in learning. So as long as you can reframe your little, what I call now speed bumps, and learn from them and get over them and move on, grow, it's going to be very, very important for everyone to be able to do that. Because what I find is now there's less and less people that know how to accept failure and learn from it properly. And we'll talk more about this later on, but this is one of the most important things that I think everyone should know, is how to have a better relationship with failure, how to learn from failure, because it will apply to everything, especially in creating a niche in an overcrowded market. Because after all, what we are talking about is entrepreneurship. And if you look at the most famous entrepreneurs in the world, their history of failure is greatly outweighs their relationship with success. And we'll talk about more of those people in a little bit. But let's talk about first the importance of a niche and why it's important. A lot of you at Brescia right now are about to finish up your internship, your student program, your practicum. It's very, very exciting, but you're looking next to the next steps, and you're thinking, well, what do I do? There are so many dietitians out there. There are so many health experts. Their voices are so powerful. They have such a established base already. How do I possibly compete? And of course, finding your own niche is one of those ways of competing. It helps set you apart from the other people, the health experts, the other dietitians out there. It helps expand the marketplace, which is fantastic for consumers because they get more identifiable options in order to be able to choose from. That is something that better helps them, and it really advances everything in regards to what we can do. So it's a really important thing to establish your niche and to go forward. The reason why, primarily in my opinion, and this is one of the issues, when we just have a dietitian out there, it doesn't speak to any particular audience. In fact, the title dietitian tries to speak to every single audience, but at the same time, when we try to do broad spectrum approaches to very specific things, it often doesn't work. In fact, what we find a lot of people now doing is that they're speaking closer and closer to one population, one thing that they're doing in order to be more effective in that population, and then grow out from that. And then that's what I've done with ESN and a Highway to Health, is I've infiltrated one market, I've established myself in that market, and then I grew out of that market to establish other things, versus the broad spectrum approach is look at other things and then try to specialize. They're both different approaches to the same kind of endpoint, but at the same time, I find right now in this current work environment, in this marketplace, that having a niche at the beginning speaks to an audience, and that's very, very important. So the 4 questions I ask myself, or to ask yourself when finding your own niche, are: 1, what are the skills or talents I'm good at? Which one of these skills and talents do I enjoy doing the most? Which one of these skills or talents do people need? And 4, which one of these skills or talents will people pay money for? Now, it's important to brainstorm objectively and not hold yourself back by thinking whether or not something's a good idea. These are just simply questions, and they're for you to basically funnel down all your thoughts into one thing or a handful of things at the end of it. So there might be a ton of skills that you're good at that you might not think people would pay for. For example, I'll use myself for example. One of the business ideas I thought of before creating ASN, and something that had already been done, which is why I didn't do it, was my skills or talents is I'm really good at remembering superhero or video game trivia, because that's one of the things I love, is watching superhero movies as well as playing video games. But of course, I wasn't going to be a professional game developer because I just didn't go to school for that, and I didn't have the knowledge. And then, of course, looking at that, what do I want to do? and then, of course, another skill or talent is physical activity, working out, and good nutrition. Which one of these skills or talents do I enjoy the most? Well, I enjoy talking about superhero movies the most, but then people are not going to really pay me for that. So instead, I found another creative outlet, and I did my podcast on superhero movies and video games. But of course, which one of these skills or talents do I enjoy the most? At the end of the day, it is nutrition. I fell in love with nutrition and food at a very early age. I wanted to do nutrition. So I wanted to talk to people about nutrition. And then, of course, this is a skill or talent that people do need right now, given the current health issues that we're experiencing in North America and, of course, internationally. So we need a little bit better guidance in regards to that, and how we can help people that truly need help with either their relationship with food, or choosing the right foods, or eating foods properly, or timing their meals, or whatever it is. And then question 4 is, which one of these skills or talents will people pay me money for? And luckily that was nutrition. So going back to all the way to number 1, what I find a lot of people doing in these situations when they're asking themselves these questions is, of course, trying to censor or filter themselves in regards to asking them all the questions they need at one time. My advice would be asking yourself each question individually, and then start putting up any thought that comes into your mind, because to me, there are no bad ideas, there are only horrible outcomes. So I'll give you an example of something that was a bad idea that had great outcome from a business perspective. In the 60s, the 1960s, there was something called a pet rock. This was without a doubt the stupidest idea ever. But because of the timing of where everyone was in the 60s with the psychedelic drug craze and everything like that, the idea of a pet rock took off. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with a pet rock, if you Google it afterwards, it is literally just a rock. And it came in a box, and they called it pet rock. It was the stupidest thing. It shouldn't have made money, but it did. And that's because it was just the timing of the event. So never think or censor yourself from a skill or a talent that you're good at, or an idea that you have, just because you think it's stupid. If something like the pet rock can make someone insanely rich, then go for it. The same thing can be said about the pool noodle. The pool noodle is a dumb idea. Let's have a piece of foam floating around, and we'll put that in water. Some guy is rich because of that. It's a dumb idea, but it had a great outcome. So the thing is, there are no, like I said before, there are no bad ideas. They're just horrible outcomes that come ahead. Now, once I figured out my niche, or what I wanted to do with sports nutrition, after asking me all those questions, I had to create 5 more steps to refine and create that niche. So step 1 to me was identifying your niche, your interest, and your passions. So I would say minimum, make a list of 10. Ask questions like, how do you like to spend your free time? What magazines, blogs, or whatever do you subscribe to? What media do you subscribe to? What do you enjoy doing? What topics do you like learning about the most? And what clubs, organizations do you belong to? In fact, I made a list of all 10 of these, plus more of these interests and passions. And when I started off with ESN, and I did a whole bunch. So something like TSN, the Sports Network, of course, Men's Health magazines, fitness blogs, Supplement University, or something like that. These were all things I loved and ideas that I loved. The topics I loved learning about the most were, of course, sports nutrition, biohacking, human bacteria, biome, exercise physiology, all that kind of stuff. And of course, how I spend my free time, ironically, as I'm a little bit of a loser and I love work a little bit too much, so I end up just reading and studying a whole lot when I don't have social plans. And of course, whenever social plans cancel, I just end up doing those same things. So of course, exercising, figuring out how different food interactions change the hormonal system of the body, which levels of physical activity activate what and do what in the body. I figured all these things out, and of course that was my interest and passion. Luckily that fit within my professional interest or passion. Step 2 was identify problems you can solve. Now, this is a hard one because there's a lot of problems in the world right now, and we all enter the field of nutrition and food wanting to solve all the problems. Realistically, we can't do this. We can only solve one thing at a time, and of course, we can only help ourselves and help others that are interested in what we want to hear. So, of course, this comes down to the problem of you can't help everyone effectively. You can help, but you can help some people well. And this is where the niche comes in. It's the idea of not looking at broad spectrum, but looking at a precision-based practice, in the sense where you identify your target demographic. For me, it was people that were physically active. Have one-on-one conversations, and this is, of course, market research, what you're doing. Have one-on-one conversations with what their needs are. So I talked to other people related to the things I wanted to do. Personal trainers, naturopaths, chiropractors, everyone. I talked to what their needs are, what they want, and everything like that. And of course, they all talked about nutrition. They were like, no one out there has been able to put together all these complicated nutrition things, figure out like sports nutrition in an easy to understand and apply perspective, because all the sports nutrition literature out there and all nutrition literature out there right now is basically held up from an academic standpoint, in the sense where there's a lot of people, and I'm talking about general people, that are not able to understand the complexities of what goes into research and nutritional research and scientific research, and those research papers don't translate into anything useful for them. So having something that was an idea of mine early on is, how do I translate research into something easy and applicable that a person can use? What I did was reviewed forums and discussion boards with what the general population, my target demographic, was looking at. What kind of things were they Googling? What kind of things were they researching? And what trends were they following? Now, this is very, very easy from a sports nutrition perspective, because all you have to do is basically read magazine articles like Men's Health or fitness magazines, and they will talk about the current trends in nutrition. What's difficult is getting ahead of those trends in nutrition, seeing what people are going to want to do next, and of course research keywords. So trying to understand everything that your target demographic is interested in and how you can speak towards that demographic in order to identify the problems that you can solve. That's step 2. Step 3 is to basically research your competition. For me, my competition was basically low quality content. People that were writing about sports nutrition in Canada right now, they weren't doing anything that was fantastic. And it was very, very basic stuff. People talking about sports nutrition that clearly had no business talking about sports nutrition, and that had a lot to do with a lot of people out there. So articles about whether or not supplements are necessary, whether or not this is how you should eat to burn fat, and this is how, all that kind of stuff. It's low quality content out there because a lot of it didn't take the complexity into consideration. Just basically read one research paper, made one conclusion, and wrote a blog post about that, as opposed to looked at the whole body of literature and then wrote a blog post about that, or created video about that. The competition out there also had a lack of transparency. They didn't really focus on education as much as I would have liked to see out there. So there was a lack of transparency. It was like, eat this to do this. Okay, well, why? To me, no one's going to do anything unless they understand why. And of course, the understanding of why, that's where the complicated part was. There was a lack of transparency because it was hard to communicate the nutritional science into a way that would make sense to the general population. So the general population are obviously are typically not trusting of things that they don't understand, or so the lack of transparency was very, very difficult. So then ended up having to oversimplify messages, and oversimplifying the nutrition recommendations. And in Canada, for me, there was a lack of paid competition. It was at the time when I started ESN about 4 years ago, there was not a lot of people doing sports nutrition in Canada. Now it's a very different story, and that a lot of that is because of me, and a lot of that is because of the boom and popularity of sports nutrition. There's a lot more paid competition right now, which is a lot more just people, noise in the environment talking about these kind of things. So there's a lot more competition now. It's a very, very different world. Step 4 is, of course, determining the profitability of your niche. You might have a really, really, really good niche, but you might not have a demographic that could pay for your services in regards to what you want. So what you have to basically do is research your demographic data and look at which subsections of your demographics could afford to pay for the services that you're doing, and which ones you can speak to best. And then step 5 is simply to test your idea, to go live and launch it. That's one of the craziest things, is when you go through all 5 of these steps, or all 4 of these steps, and then get to step 5, it's a very, very nerve-wracking thing, because you don't know what the world is going to respond to, how it's going to respond. So this is why I say get used to failure or have a better relationship with failure, because of the idea that once you go live, you will have, no matter how good your project is, you will have to make changes to the product that you have. So let's, for example, take a look at the Microsoft model of announcing operating systems versus the Apple model of operating systems. Whereas in Microsoft, what they typically do is put out an operating system out there that is, let's say, 70 to 80% functional. And then what they will do is add software patches on top of that to change according to what the feedback is from the demographics, what they want, how to optimize things, what things need to be changed, and all that kind of stuff. With Apple, what they do is they create an operating software that has very little room to change later on. And so that once you get it, that's the final product. Don't expect it to change at all. So to me, what happens is with Apple, they're not listening to the target demographic whatsoever, and because they're so concerned with pushing out a product that is as polished as possible, what ends up happening is they're gambling a lot more on each product launch, because the operating software out there, if the public doesn't like it for whatever reason or doesn't like the features, there's no room to go back and change. Versus the Microsoft model, there is a little bit more room to change and modify your data, but modify your product and your whole launch. So that's the way I basically look at this. Is your launch, are you going to approach this like Microsoft, or are you going to approach this like Apple? And that's something you have to ask yourself too. And that has to align with your own personalities. So let's talk about how I created my niche. So we talked about Evolve Sport and Nutrition, which was established in 2014. I started my career in 2010, where in long-term care, and it was decided long-term care was no longer for me. I then decided, okay, what do I want to do next? I'm in a little bit of a career spot, and I've only been 4 years in my career. And I decided, well, screw it. I was young enough. And this is what I'm envious of. And because when you look at entrepreneurs and when you look at game changers, they're often this really interesting age between 25 to 35, where I always say, and I've examined this, and I've listened to many entrepreneurs and CEOs talk about this, but that's the age that is very, very exciting, because you're too young to know better, and you're just too ambitious at that point in time. It's almost like there's this recklessness that is good, because what happens is, as you get older, the more you learn, you get more conservative with your decision making, and you take less risks. So starting a business in a niche market becomes a little bit more difficult, versus what ends up happening is the people that end up having careers or companies later on in life, what I find is that they really have the ability to refine a product as opposed to innovate a product. And it's a very, very interesting thing to look at. So between 25 to 35, and of course I'm still within that sweet spot, which is why I'm generating a lot of business ideas and a lot of tough stuff that I'm looking at. What I basically found from doing my 5 steps was that there were no paid sports nutrition jobs. And that's really, really crazy. So there are a couple in Canada, but of course there wasn't any availability. And the reason for that was because sports nutrition is not well established in Canada. And that was because the Canadian culture of sports was not as crazy as it is, and not as developed as it is, I should say, in America and Australia. But of course, sports nutrition is very well established in America and Australia. So the content was already there. The research was already there. The things that people were doing, they were already there. So what I needed to do was bring that into Canada and hope the Canadian culture of sport grew. Luckily, I did, because there was legislation that the federal government did to change funding to athletes to focus more on the high-end elite level athletes and disregard the middle tier as well as bottom tier of athletes, and let the private company figure that out. What that allowed Canadian athletes and Canadian culture of sports to do was evolve to look at the high level of competition. So the Olympics, professionals, and world international grounding stuff, because Canada wanted to become better at sports. And luckily, everything happened at the exact same time, around 2010 to 2014. And then what I did was I examined what I liked and what I hated about current practices, both in the world of dietetics and nutrition, as well as in sports and nutrition, and combined, and then basically developed my business plan by studying the most successful people or companies I can find. And this is really, really funny, it's from Henry Ford to Bruce Lee to Taylor Swift to Elon Musk and Chapters Indigo. These were just a couple of examples I could find, because Henry Ford was fascinating to me, and he was the inventor of the first automobile ever. He was fascinating to me from an innovation standpoint because he famously said in an interview, or was quoted saying this, that and I'm paraphrasing here, that it almost doesn't matter what people want, because if he asked people what they wanted for the Ford Model One, they would have said faster horses. No one would have conceived of an automobile that ran independently from horses. So to him, innovation, it didn't matter what your demographic want. Your demographic is not going to want to tell you or not going to be able to conceive of these things, because if they did, then you would have done something, it would have existed already. Of course, Henry Ford, with his innovative idea for the automobile, that was fantastic. Bruce Lee, I really heavily admire him because he took something that already existed, Chinese martial art, and he found a way to market that and sell it in North America where it didn't exist. It was an unknown quantity, and just basically pushed everything out there. So for me, it's kind of like in Canada, bringing that US and Australian research and their practices over to Canada was kind of similar to the Bruce Lee kind of method. Find a new market, have something developed, and then find a new market, modify it, and adopt it. Because when he started, Bruce Lee, he created something called Jeet Kune Do, which is a very different kind of martial art that didn't exist until he came around. And it took philosophies from multiple martial arts and combined them together. He took basically what he liked and what he didn't like. He got rid of what he didn't like and applied what he did like to create something brand new. Arguably one of the first mixed martial arts out there was Jeet Kune Do, because he combined so many different things from so many different martial arts backgrounds. Taylor Swift, I think, is a funny one because I find it's very, very fast. Her story is very, very fascinating from the perspective of she started off as a country singer, and the country music demographics aren't that widely marketable. But she found a way to transcend that market and go into a bigger market. She established herself well in the country music categories, and then grew into general pop culture, which is exactly the kind of method that I was looking at. So I was like, what did Taylor Swift do? How did she get good at being in the country music scene and then grow out into the pop culture scene? That's essentially what I wanted ESN to do, was communicate well with one audience and then grow, but not leave behind that one audience, still service that audience really, really well, and find new audiences to speak to. That was what Taylor Swift did, and that's what I wanted ESN to do. Elon Musk, I think, is fascinating because he's the entrepreneur that has had arguably more failure than anyone else in the world. He was involved with PayPal in the early days, and he was kicked out as CFO because his ideas were too wild. Of course, now he did a couple other things around then. I don't know his business history too well off the top of my head right now, but of course now he is the CEO of something as crazy as Tesla, and then creating other kind of solutions for this world. Of course, Tesla being the amazing electric car company that it is. What he did, which was fascinating, what inspired me about him was that he just never gave up, and he always found a way to innovate something new and be different and just do something like that. And of course, Chapters Indigo finally was a company that I was absolutely fascinated with, because everything from a technological standpoint, everything was saying, and the market is still doing this, which is why this is fascinating. Bookstores and books in general is a dying market because of the advent of ebooks and everything related to online digital marketing, as well as piracy and all that kind of stuff. Chapters Indigo is a company that shouldn't exist right now, or should have a much harder time existing. In fact, the funny thing to me was that Future Shop closed down before Chapters Indigo did. And that was absolutely fascinating. How does a company that's grounded in something that's supposed to go out based on technological advances, how do they continue to innovate, change their brand, change their model so that they're still relevant and they stay in business? And they're just as strong as they are now, back when the e-reader came out, when everyone predicted that the bookstore is going to go bankrupt and everything like that. Smaller bookstores are, which is unfortunately very, very sad, but Chapters Indigo has found a way to stay relevant. And of course, with ESN, I had to identify my goals and barriers to success. And of course, this is where we're going to talk about how I identified my goals and, of course, how I got over those things. So this is a Venn diagram, or lovingly how I call them Venn diagrams, because I draw them so oftenly. But this is the Venn diagram for what ESN was supposed to be. I took my past history training as a pastry chef and a chef, so the culinary aspect, combined that with my dietetic training, as well as me being a triathlete, marathoner, and personal trainer in order to create something called ESN. To my knowledge at the time, nothing out there existed. It was just all nutrition or all culinary or all personal training. Nobody had looked at combining anything before, and that's to me where the gold was combining all three things. These were three things, separate things I was good at, that and to pursue one thing, it didn't have to be brand new. It could be a different approach in regards to the combination of multiple things. So I took my culinary background, my travel history, my background, my knowledge of food, to make sure that ESN could counsel people from different cultures, and that was very, very important. Being in Toronto, having the wide amount of amazing multiculturalism was there, to find a way to break free of the traditional training of dietetics, which is purely centered around the North American diet. How do I translate that training into the culinary side of things, as well as the cultural side of things? That was one area I figured out. Dietetics was an area that was good, and of course, with the because I'd already been a dietitian, practiced for a number of years, got to know food systems in long-term care, got that professional experience, but also got to lean on a lot of the literature and a lot of the established stuff that other researchers were doing in Australia and America, and really bring that knowledge into Canada. And then being an athlete and personal trainer allowed me to look at nutrition very, very differently in the regards to how am I looking at the physical activity, what is that physical activity doing, what am I hoping to do with the changes, and what is my knowledge as an athlete and personal trainer in regards to periodization or different concepts related to sport that don't necessarily get translated into dietetics very well. So I created, at that point, periodized nutrition plans to support different phases of training. So with, for example, with triathletes, what I do is a 3-phased care plan for their race season. So phase 1 would be targeting body composition. So getting them, because a lot of triathletes will spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to reduce the weight of their bike by 500 grams, but won't spend the money to look at their nutrition to shed off weight from their frame, so that they're moving faster in a more aerodynamic fashion on the bike, but also putting a better power to weight ratio out there. So taking a look at the phase 1, how to do that. Phase 2, looking at performance-based measures, how I can time different supplements, different nutrition interventions, different doses at different times to prevent fatigue, prevent exhaustion, and promote recovery and repair from that aspect. And then phase 3, focusing on game day or race day, and looking at all the different variables that needed to be done for triathletes, for endurance athletes, or any athlete to prepare on race day and get into that mentality. So combining all three of those things, I created ESN. And what ESN became at that point was I gained a lot of popularity very, very quickly doing this, especially professionally. There was a lot of physiotherapy companies that wanted to work with me, and it got to the point where I was negotiating way too many contracts and only had way too little time. So what I decided to do was change ESN's kind of mission out there, and to scale it from that point, from a business standpoint, and started looking at other dietitians to train, to do nutrition my way, and then staff them at physiotherapy clinics. So then within 3 years of ESN being live and profitable within the first few years, which is that's a really, really hard thing to do in the world of the entrepreneurial world. Not only was I doing that, but I was also training and staffing the dietitians across the GTA and across Canada, and at physiotherapy clinics where we really wanted to work together with people, bring the multidisciplinary care model into the outpatient setting in Canada. And that was very, very exciting to help pioneer that. So that's where ESN is now, and of course we're moving forward with the ESN Learning Center. The new thing I want to speak to is, of course, Highway to Health, the TV show I developed, and pitched to the Bell Fibe Network, Bell Media. So what it will be doing is it will be premiering January of 2019, and I'm very, very excited, very anxious and proud of this product because I just can't even explain to you how nerve-wracking this experience is right now, what's going on day to day. But anyways, what Highway to Health is a travel show based on health and the culture of health and celebrating the people that practice and interpret health differently for special populations. Because to me, health and nutrition is very, very good at captivating the general audience, but a lot of the other demographics were being left behind. So people with disabilities, as well, and there's tons of demographics that we explore within Highway to Health that allows us to basically shed some more exposure as well as education around people that don't fit into health streams necessarily all that much, the people that don't fit into big box gyms, the people that don't fit into everyday nutrition practices for the general population, because that's unfortunately a lot of what the world of health and wellness is. It's appealing to the mass audience. So therefore, I found my demographics, the ones that I want to target in on. I found what I wanted to do. And for me personally, I know a lot of you will be nodding your heads at your computer screens, but right now in the world of health and wellness, there's very, very biased approaches to health and very heavy-handed dogmatic approaches to health. Either it's people are talking about keto is the only way you should eat, or intermittent fasting is the only way you should eat, or it should be this new acid-base balance diet, or anything new. It's extremely biased and extremely dogmatic, and I wanted to promote something that's a little bit more balanced, and that was very, very hard to do because especially for me, someone that has now incorporated all these different extreme diets into my practice, but in a very balanced way. So incorporating keto into my practice, intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, all this kind of stuff, as well as the sports and nutrition stuff into my practice. It was very, very difficult, but of course, there's not a lot of people out there that can do that. What I wanted to do was be able to understand all these things separately and be able to choose them for the right person that's in front of me. So what fits that person the best, what makes the most sense? And that's what Highway to Health is essentially. A more balanced view of health, having a good understanding of every single thing, and then educating about every single thing. I was extremely tired of biased and unqualified health experts. People can just go on like anywhere and call themselves a health expert right now, a nutritionist, whatever. So I wanted a more educated understanding of what health and wellness is to the general population, and I found a way to incorporate travel in that, because I think if I was to do the show entirely in Toronto, I had no interest in doing a studio talk show, which is essentially what that would have done. So I changed the pitch of the show to look at travel, and so we explored for season 1, which is fully shot and edited. And we just submitted everything to Bell last week. There was we got to explore. We were lucky enough to explore the Southern Ontario region as opposed to staying in Toronto, and that was really, really exciting. So for season 1, we did Hamilton, Niagara, and Burlington, which was really, really cool to see how their different communities, their populations, their demographics interpreted health very, very differently. And of course, ideally, hopefully the show is a success so that I can go all throughout Canada to do this, as well as hopefully one day the pipe dream is all around the world. But essentially we created something, Colin and I, who is the gentleman with the camera in the background, we were shooting some promo clips and some promo videos and stuff like that that day in the alleyway. He is now the co-creator and the director of the show, and my media partner now. There was no other show like this out there. So we got really, really excited because he has the same outlook on everything that I do, which is if there's something that doesn't exist, we get really excited because we get to be the first ones there. And we get to basically do whatever we do things the way we want, and we get to have all those discussions. We identified an audience. We looked at the demographics for who would be interested in a show looking at health, looking at travel, looking at social justice, and we identified the audience and we created content. We recorded episodes. We found people to interview that suited that audience, and we examined TV shows that I loved and hated, like I did with the the entrepreneur's mindset. So I looked at shows. Obviously, Anthony Bourdain, all his shows, Parts Unknown, is a huge, huge, huge inspiration on this show. And something like David Chang's Ugly Delicious on Netflix, and as well as the Chef Table series on Netflix, was something I absolutely love, and just realized that that was stuff that we could borrow from, but also we had to do something that was completely original on ourselves. And it was just fantastic to have a director that shared the same vision to be able to do that, to promote the show and create the show. Because what we have now is something I'm extremely proud of, and something that I can't wait for you to see. And Highway to Health, the Venn diagram would be, of course, looking at travel, people, the communities, stories, personal stories, and of course health. And we integrated that all within Highway to Health. So I love Venn diagrams, and I highly encourage you to take a look at one or explore one if that's what you're looking to do. But right now, so we created what I'm now doing, I should say, is running both ESN as well as Highway to Health. Now, this is a very, very difficult thing to do, obviously. It's a very nerve-wracking thing to do. So what I've had to actually do is have some very, very difficult conversations with myself and do a lot of self-reflection and realize that in order for ESN to continue growing and in order for Highway to Health to continue growing, I needed more people to help me. So what we did this year, especially with the ESN Learning Center, as well as ESN, I hired a VP, someone to help me with day-to-day stuff and make sure the execution of everything was really, really well, because I had to have a conversation, self-reflection kind of practice where I realized that I'm an ideas person. I'm not the best execution person out there. Fine details are something that does not interest me, but it interests other people. So working towards our strength and working towards other people, that was something that was very, very difficult, because when you create something, when you foster something and it's a baby and it's growing, you want to be there every step of the way. But sometimes the best thing that you can do is actually step away from something and let someone else run it and do a better job than you are. So that's something I've had to do with ESN this year. So actually the funny thing is now my VP, Catherine, she tells me what to do. And it's a really, really funny thing. And that's worked a lot better this year for ESN. And 2019 is going to be much, much better, especially with the Learning Center that we're having, because we're doing in January, this is very, very exciting. We're doing this sports nutrition certificate for ESN, where we're looking at sports nutrition to teach dietitians and other nutrition professionals about sports nutrition the way ESN does it, where we're fusing together all these other disciplines and we're practicing that in a very unique way that's having some some amazing results in regards to body composition change, in regards to health and wellness, and of course athletic performance, because all these things we've done for a long time, and we thought that it's important that everyone have access to this information, so that everyone can get rapidly better, because there's something very, very wrong with the way, in my opinion at least, and this is no disrespect to anyone out there, but there's what we're continuing to do in the world of dietetics and nutrition is clearly not working, because the health status of our population keeps getting worse. So what we needed to do was something different. And of course, Einstein's my favorite person to quote here, in the sense where insanity isn't doing different things. It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So to me, in order to promote health and fight wealth health, we needed to do something different. I needed to create ESN and of course combine everything else that was related to health and wellness, and of course to counsel based on that, as opposed to traditionally what we've been taught as dietitians and nutritionists. And for Highway to Health, we needed to find a way to promote health in a very, very different and new and excited way. So that's what we did for Highway to Health. So let's look at why it worked with ESN. It was different than anything else out there. It's continually evolving. In fact, that's one of the biggest things about it, is like now if we were to draw a Venn diagram now about what ESN does, there's so many overlapping circles that it's crazy, that I wouldn't even know if I can do a proper Venn diagram out there, but it's something that's working and it's doing something that's really, really cool. We're continually evolving. We're creating the ESN Learning Center to look at different populations, different people to service, and demographics. It's combine complementary disciplines to better understand nutrition. So everything I currently know about nutrition, I learned by studying physiology, exercise science, and kinesiology, more so than nutrition itself, because what I wanted to do was understand, okay, this is what the nutrition is doing, but how is it being used by the body? Nutrition can't teach you that. physiology, exercise science, and kinesiology could. So we're looking at part of the puzzle when it comes to nutrition. When we combine it with knowledge about exercise science, kinesiology, and physiology, then it becomes a very different beast altogether, and we interpret nutrition, well, at least I interpret nutrition very, very differently, and that's what I'm hoping the ESN Learning Center Sports Nutrition Certificate course in January is going to achieve. It filled a void. Like I said, there were sports nutrition jobs, but there wasn't sports nutrition specific jobs for the general population. So ESN filled that void, and it did help it spoke to a demographic that wasn't being spoken to in Canada. So that's why I was successful. And the other thing was no one was able to figure out what I was doing. That's one of the most important things was if people can figure out what you're doing, you're becoming irrelevant. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Highway to Health. Now, like I said, it's coming out in January, and I am so nervous about it right now. And it's the funniest thing in the world because I'm not someone that does well with success. Like I said earlier, I do better with failure. I understand and I learn from failure, but this is a show that I'm very confident will work. Why Highway to Health will work. It's the first TV show of its kind. It's the first TV show produced, created, and hosted by a dietitian in Canada. There is another TV show for the nationwide broadcast. So in January, the moment it airs, it makes history. And that just blows my mind. It really does. And it will air to over 3 million viewers for the Bell Fibe Network. And of course, we're looking at other ways of getting the show out to the general population that have a wider audience appeal. And I'll keep you posted about that. It's continually evolving. Right now, I'm writing season 2. We're looking at how to do different things for season 2, what we want to do, but we always want to keep the show evolving, something new, something different. What other forms of health should we look at? What are interesting topics? What are other people concerned about? It's taking a centrist, balanced view of health, and I think that's going to be very, very important coming forward because everything in this world right now, media-wise, without getting into the politics, everything is more and more divided and polarized than ever. And I think it's important to have people being voices of reason and speaking to the center and being like, well, what are we doing right now? How do we do this? How do we, eat healthier without promoting something as extreme as keto? And I'm not knocking keto. I'm just saying that it's an extreme way of eating that has a lot of problems with it. Can be clinically very, very useful, as I've shown in my practice and my ESN Learning Center course for the ketogenic diet for dietitians. It's something that's very, very positive, but of course it needs a lot of respect and balance towards that. How do we have something that promotes health without being so extreme? And that's why we wanted a more centrist, balanced view on what health is and health promotion. We looked at journalism, finding journalism methods. So when I created the show, what I realized what I was doing was I'm actually becoming a journalist now, not a dietitian. So I had to actually do a lot of reading, a lot of courses about what good journalism is, how to do that properly, and promote that to the population to be able to speak to those audience. We're filling a void because right now, to the best of my knowledge, from all the market research that I've done as well as the team at Bell has done, there's nothing else like this out there. There's nothing else examining health in this way, and it's wildly unpredictable. There's a lot of people that know or think they know what Highway to Health is all about, but honestly, they have no idea. I released the teaser trailer, I think it was last week, and then sometime soon, within a week, and you're going to have to stay posted for this, the full trailer is going to come out. And I think a lot of people are going to have a lot more excitement about what the full trailer is and giving them a better idea what it's going to be. And then January, the show launches on Bell, and it's going to be nuts. So I think that why Highway to Health will work is because it's very, very, it's doing all these things. It's the first of its kind. It's continuing evolving. It's focusing on speaking to a different population, filling a void, and it's unpredictable. And of course, this is one of the most important things because how to keep your niche relevant. As soon as I created ESN, within 3 years when people started to figure out what I was doing, they started copying me. And copycats will follow suit. That's just the way the market works. People will copy what you're doing, especially if it's a successful product. You should not worry, though, as long as you're able to continue to evolve and look at what the market's showing. continuously looking at the markets, the demographics, and what they're telling us, where they're shifting their focus, and continually evolving your approach to suit those demographics. Don't be afraid to stray away from your original plan. I know a lot of people out there have plans, 5, 10-year, 20-year plans that they are hard set on. And to me, if it's so dogmatically structured, you're going to end up having difficulty in regards to evolving with the needs of the population. Because what you're eventually going to have is you might hit that 5-year plan, but you might be irrelevant by the time you hit it. So always be able to change your plan, have a goal of where you want to be in the future, but don't be so tied to it. Research what your demographics are researching, and this includes all the like everything that they're researching, everything they're interested in, and always keep an open mind, because this is the most important thing. Keeping an open mind will allow you to better interpret what you need to look at and how you need to change things in order to coming in. Like I said, creating a better relationship with fail as the first attempt in learning is extremely important. Because now we're going to talk about the most important lessons I learned as an entrepreneur. First thing is comfort, I find, is always the enemy of growth. If I'm ever comfortable, I am so uncomfortable, in the sense where I feel like if I'm comfortable, I've stopped growing, I've stopped being relevant. It's not working anymore. I have to do something radically different in order to change my perception. That's how I've always been. That's just my personality. Know your limits, and this is something that's I find very ironic for me to state out there, because I always push my limits way too much, to the point where I crash and burn and shut down from burnout regularly. And this is something I'm getting better at. So setting limits on yourself, knowing yourself, having honest discussions with yourself, knowing the very worst about yourself is something that has allowed me to better overcome those limits. So for example, understanding earlier this year that I'm an ideas person, not an execution person. And in order to solve that for the good of my company, I had to hire people that are execution people, not idea people, that would work well with me, that complement my personality, that can help me address those limitations in my area, and just keep doing what I do best and allow them to do what they do best, to know their limits and address them. Always understand you're always going to be a student. You're always going to be learning. It doesn't matter what age you are in the world of entrepreneurship or creating a market or niche or whatever. You always have to continuously learn. There's never a time that it's acceptable to stop learning. The biggest thing is check your ego. Always check your ego. It's really funny, because I find, especially with the world of dietetics and nutrition, there's a lot of ego involved which prevents people from achieving what they really need, because especially with dogmatic systems, people are very tied to what they've been doing for a long period of time, and because they've been good at that for a long period of time. But all of a sudden, it's not that you're not good at it, it's just that the market and the demographic and the audience changed what they want. So just because you're good at that one thing, let's say you're really good at Latin, as a good example. You're really good at Latin, reading and writing. Well, it's joked as the dead language. Nobody speaks or writes Latin anymore. It's become irrelevant. No matter how good you are, it's still going to be important there, but it's irrelevant now. You have to evolve into something different, and you have to learn. And the trick there is not to climb a new mountain. But once you've climbed that mountain, once you've gotten good at that, the goal is how to find a way across. So you're not climbing the mountain again, but you're looking at what lessons have I learned from climbing this mountain, and what can I take to the next mountain and climb that. Embrace the darkness, embrace the dark side and the unknown. What I mean by that is, if nothing exists, then you're the first one there. For a lot of people, that's very scary territory. They don't like that. They don't like looking at research and being like, well, or asking a question being like, well, there's no research. I don't know what to do. This is really exciting to me. When you look at something that has no research, or there's no clear path ahead, you're going to do something very good, and something that's revolutionary. And this is where comfort is the enemy of growth, right? So if you embark on a journey where no one has gone before, you're pushing outside your comfort zone. You're learning so much more, and you're going to be the first pioneer there. And there's always going to be something. Because, like I said, with failure, always get back up. Always get back up. There are always going to be things that knock you down, and things that. But the most important lesson I've found is you have to find a way to get back up. James Maynard Keenan, the lead singer of Tool and the mastermind behind Tool, he's someone I always really, really admire. I heard him at his book tour about 3 years back, and he succinctly put into words so well what I've always had my entire life. But he says, I never lose. I either win or I learn. So if I win, great. But if I've lost, or failed, or whatever you want to call it, I've learned something new about myself. So next time I'm coming back angrier than ever, and I'm channeling that energy into succeeding. That I know the lesson is going to be there. And for me, again, I really love Metallica and just heavy metal music in general. So this lyric really, really spoke to me. Just as soon as I belong, then it's time I disappear. Now it's from I Disappear from the MI2 soundtrack, which is not the best movie or the best song, but the lyric means a lot to me. Just as soon as I belong, then it's time to disappear. And I know for a lot of you students right now, that's a very frustrating thing to hear, because especially in internship, where you're at a rotation for about 4 to 5 weeks or so, you get good at the rotation within week 3, and then all of a sudden week 4, you've got 1 week where you're like, good, I'm confident at this, and then you start a new rotation, you have to learn all again. To me, that was the most exciting thing about internship, was because I didn't want to be comfortable. I was going to learn more the more uncomfortable I was. So the moment I belong somewhere, the moment I'm getting good at something, I'm going to disappear from it. And that's what keeps me unpredictable at the same time in regards to the entrepreneurial world. And one of the most important lessons I've learned is always, always be genuine. The audience can always tell whether or not you're faking it, you're acting. The audience is so much smarter than you'll ever give them credit for, or we can ever give anyone credit for. The audience is much more educated. Their critical thinking ability is much better than ever before. They will be able to sniff out whether or not someone is genuine, or whether or not someone's fake about what they want. When I see dietitians and nutritionists writing about sports nutrition, and they're not genuinely interested in sports nutrition, or they're trying to practice sports nutrition but they don't even like sport, I know they're not going to do well. And because the audience will be able to figure that out. They figure out, okay, well, you just marketed yourself with this way, you don't actually like sport, you can't actually speak to it that well. Be genuine with what you want. Be genuine with yourself, because there's not enough time in this world to be anyone other than who you are. Do it, and do it for you, and your niche will follow. There's no questions right now for the students, but because what I'm going to do is log off, we're going to upload this to YouTube. But what I wanted to do is share with you the social media sites for Evolve Sport and Nutrition, as well as Highway to Health, which again is coming out in January on the Bell Fibe Network, and we're going to have a lot more information going forward about where it's going to be after that, if we're going to do anything different. So there's the Instagram channels, the YouTube channels, which the Highway to Health trailer is going to be uploaded to sometime next week. So you're going to have to pay attention to the Instagram channels in order to know when it's going to go live. And of course, that trailer I'm really, really proud of and really excited for everyone to see. But right now, thank you all for listening. And I know there's periods of time where I'm speaking a little bit too fast. I'm trying to work a little bit on that. So luckily, this is going to be recorded, and it's going to be put on YouTube, on the ESN YouTube channel for the whole world to see. And I really want to thank Brescia University for being able to host and partner up with this very, very cool topic and this new innovative way to do this. And thank you all for watching, and please reach out if you have any questions or any concerns like that. But thank you very much. Have a good day.